You're listening to Life of the Record, classic albums told by the people who made them. My name is Dan Nordheim.
Welcome to Nashville Now, Rolling Stone's new podcast, hosted by me, Joseph Hudak. Each week on Nashville Now, we'll bring you the biggest stories shaking up the scene, along with the songs and the artists you just need to know. We'll also do some one-on-one interviews with the most important voices in country music. We're going to dive into it, the songs and the artists that are all part of the conversation. Country is here. Nashville is now. Listen to Rolling Stone's Nashville Now, coming to you every Wednesday, wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey, Talkhouse Network listeners, I'm Jad Abumrad. You may know me from Radiolab or Dolly Parton's America. I'm here to tell you about my new show, Higher Ground's latest music podcast called Fela Kuti Fear No Man. In a world that's on fire, what do we do with art? Like music, is it just there to distract us? Or can a song actually change the world? I'm Jad Abumrad. In this series, we dive into the life and the music of Fela Kuti, the fiercest musical warrior that ever was. And I'm not the only one who thinks this.
Fela has to be the epicenter.
Questlove.
The passion, the pain.
Jay-Z.
The need to get the message out there.
Beyonce quoted Fela on one of her albums.
He invited me out to this club just outside Lagos.
And then there is Paul McCartney, Sir Paul. He tells the story of seeing Fela play.
And when this music broke, I ended up just weeping.
We'll tell you about his life, ignite a youth movement, dive into hidden archives to find out what does rebellion look like, sound like, when the weapon is not guns, but music. Join us for Fela Kuti Fear No Man. Listen on Audible or wherever you get your podcasts.
Sharon Van Etten grew up in New Jersey and studied music by learning several instruments and singing in the choir. After graduating high school, she went to Middle Tennessee State University to study recording. Though she started writing songs around the year 2000, she didn't perform or release music until 2005 when she moved back to New Jersey. Later, she moved to New York and started working for Bada Bing Records. She signed to the Language of Stone label and released her debut album, Because I Was in Love, in 2009. Her next record, Epic, was released in 2010 and included the song Love More, which was recorded for the Shaking Through documentary series. After a group of musicians, including Aaron Dessner and Justin Vernon, covered the song Love More, Sharon reached out to them to see if they'd be interested in collaborating. She began recording songs with Aaron Dessner in his garage studio in Brooklyn. Her third album, TRAMP, was eventually released in 2012. In this episode, Sharon Van Etten and Aaron Dessner reflect on how the album came together. This is the making of TRAMP.
I'm Sharon Van Etten, and we are on Life of the Record talking about the making of the album Tramp. You know, it's always growing pains, I think, when you take a big leap and you try something new. You know, I try to do something new every time I make a record, and this one happened to be the biggest leap I had taken at that point. And I don't think I ever would have leaned into that rock edge if Aaron Dessner, my big brother, didn't push me over that edge.
Color of sorrow, you're over me. You, with eyes through, leaning forward, not giving
little backstory before I get into TRAMP, because this kind of leads into how I met Aaron Dessner. But right before I made Epic, I was able to record a song called Love More. And it was a single before I ever made the record. And it was in collaboration with Brian McTeer as part of the Shaking Through Weather Vane series. And that one song did so well, and I had such an incredible time working through him. It's a bit of a visual tape op based out of Philadelphia. It's the recording, writing, mixing of a song from front to back. And after I made that one song, I had a video sent to me that Bon Iver and The National had covered the song Love More. And I reached out to them to see if they would want to record on Epic, because I decided to make this record because of that one song. And they were on tour and very busy making their records during that time. It was about 2009. And so Aaron kept in touch with me over the course of that year and just said, well, maybe we can do some writing together.
Yeah, I'm Aaron Dessner, and I was the producer of the record. I became aware of Sharon in 2007 or 8 because my sister used to book this tiny venue called Sycamore. It was a flower shop and a bar in Brooklyn, deep in Brooklyn, in what's known as Ditmas Park, where we all lived. And it was just like this 40-person venue in a basement below this bar that was like our neighborhood bar. And Sharon played, and around the same time, Justin Vernon, Bon Iver, Justin Vernon, he's a good friend of mine and has been for many years, and he shared this song of Sharon's called Love More that she had done on the Weather Vane. It's like a series where they would, make a song in this beautiful studio in Philadelphia. And so she had done this song Love More, and Justin was obsessed with it. What happened was that Justin and my brother and I covered Sharon's song at Music Now, which is in Cincinnati, this festival that Bryce, my brother, had started. Has kind of focused on new collaborations, and we had done a set with Justin in 2009 maybe, or maybe it was 2008, where we basically improvised, and one of the things we played was Sharon's Love More. And then she reached out. I don't remember if she actually asked if we could collaborate, but she just sort of said like, wow, that was beautiful, and I think I know your sister, and and then I think I said, well, why don't we, I would love to meet you, because I know you live in Brooklyn also. And so she drove over and came, and I had this studio in my garage at that point behind my house in Brooklyn. And I think even that day we started recording, maybe, because I think I just said like, wow, it would be fun to make some stuff. And I think at this point she was actually living out of her car, or at least it seemed like it, because she'd been traveling around the country in her, I think it was a Subaru, like an old Subaru station wagon, playing house shows.
So at the time, I was I was house sitting for my friend Catherine for a little while in Fort Greene, up the street from Bada Bing Records, where I also used to work. And whenever I was on tour, I would just put my stuff in storage or leave it with a friend, and I would get in my Subaru and just go from state to state. And that was normal to me. And I was living in Bushwick for a little while, but you have to sublet to make ends meet as an artist in New York, especially during that time. I was constantly writing. I said yes to every single show I could say yes to, and every single tour I could jump on and support. And to me, it wasn't a struggle, and I never thought I was homeless because I knew that I could always find a bed, or, it's very rarely I had to sleep in my car, but I kept a lot of my things in there. And Aaron had a house in Ditmas Park, which is on the way to Coney Island, south of Prospect Park. And he had a studio in his backyard where he did a lot of his writing with his brother Bryce and the rest of the National. And it was a bit of a haven for me during that time, because we were both in between touring and in between writing. And so it was like we were fitting this in piecemeal as we had other careers and scattered lives. So it meant a lot that he wanted to make the time to make these songs with me.
And I'd never worked with anyone outside of the National, really, at that point. So this was like a first moment of sort of understanding what it was to collaborate, on something other than my own music. It was super early for her in her process, so there wasn't a lot of stability, and I had a house and I had sort of a life. They had built a studio, and like the National had a bunch of success by that point. So it felt like a window maybe into like, well, you can do this, you can pay your rent, make songs and make it work. And she was already well on her way, but I think this was like a real moment of like, she was able to make a record at her own speed without really having to compromise or be on a clock, because we didn't do it that way. It was just really just coming over whenever we had time. And so it was comfortable in that sense. And for me, I was like, I got to work with this incredible young artist and sort of learn that I had this capacity to help somebody. If I could hear some magic in their music, or hear that I could add to it, that would be a really rewarding, creative, and emotional thing to do, and that you could make lasting friendships. And so we were just both learning at that time. It was really amazing to be part of it.
To be honest, I was a bit intimidated to flesh out the sound of my demos, because I always had this feeling of inadequacy, especially when you surround yourself by people that are successful. And I was a solo writer I'm still kind of a solo writer, but I started off being solo, and I was, from a very young age, I was told that any guy that wanted to play music with you just wanted to get in your pants. And so that was like ingrained in me, but he was one of the first people that I could let go of that fear that other people instilled in me and hear his ideas through. But when he had his level of professionalism coming into the studio and calling in his circle, he also gave me the permission to open the door to bring my friends in to feel more comfortable and feel in a safer place. So he helped me get the confidence to be able to speak up about the things that I heard in my head that I didn't necessarily have the language for.
And she was learning to collaborate more openly with, we had all kinds of friends coming through and playing kind of the way that we had always made records in the National, where it's basically just like whoever's in the neighborhood, like, could they stop by and see what happens, So Bryan from the National played drums and some songs, and Ben Lands and my brother. Ben Lands was someone who played with Sufjan, played with the National in Beirut, and he came and played brass, and Zach Condon from Beirut just came through, and that kind of thing was happening. And she was totally open to it, at least on the surface. I think it was like there were moments where we had to kind of focus in on what was true to her.
You something. You mean something. Genuinely show me. Genuinely open to
I think initially we just started to she would play songs for me in the studio, and then we would arrange them and work on them. Sometimes we would change them, or, a lot of them transformed, because up to that point she hadn't really had a band. So she was playing mostly by herself still. And then she did start to tour with some people around that time. So her sound was sort of evolving. It was really transformed. It was like a moment from where she was, going from making sort of folk songs to making rock songs and other kinds of songs. And she's kind of kept on that journey all along. Like every time she makes a record, I feel like there's some progression, and she became such a great producer of her own music. But yeah, so that was sort of just a moment of both of us experimenting and trying things. And then there was a moment like maybe halfway through, because it kind of took a year. And maybe halfway through, I was like, well, are there other things, other songs that you haven't played me? And that's when there was a hard drive that I did go through and found a bunch of things, like actually What Became Serpents and What Became Warsaw and a couple other songs, where I think this happens a lot with artists where they don't always value everything, or there's fragments that they haven't finished, or they tend to love the songs that they have written most recently more than the ones that might have existed before, which is natural, but it's not always, I like to excavate because you never know what's in something.
I am a folder person, so all of these were demos that had built up over the years, and I had a late start as far as pursuing music seriously. So I started writing songs in about 2000, and my first record didn't come out till 2009. So it's taken me a long time to get these songs out. So I would send him 1 or 2 a day over the course of a month or something like that. And from my terrible demos, well, the demos weren't terrible, but my programming was, because I would use my keyboard to program in drum entrances and tempos and things like that. But I can play instruments very minimally, but enough to hopefully give people ideas. But I just remember him laughing, saying, "Oh, you don't need help writing. you need help with making this record."
So Sharon's very specific and very different than I had ever encountered. And it took a second to kind of understand. Like at that time, she really didn't enjoy playing the click tracks, and she mostly needed to play an instrument and sing at the same time, and then to build around that, if you're going to add drums or other things after the fact, is not the easiest thing, and very different to how the National had worked or other situations that I had grown accustomed to. But it did actually allow for both of us to grow. And I think we sort of met in the middle somewhere. All of the initial recording happened in my garage in Ditmas in Brooklyn, and Sharon would just come over, in midday and stay till 2 or 3 a.m. sometimes. And we would basically record and produce as far as we could get without having other people with us. And then at some point, once we accumulated, we basically had recorded the whole album, and then I wanted to add real drums that weren't, me playing basically, or weren't programmed, because there was some programming. And so we went back to Minor Street, where she had done that version of Love More that was so enchanting for the Weather Vane series. And so we went back there, and that's where Matt Barrick from the Walkmen lives here in Philadelphia. So he joined us and played the drums. And it was a really important day where the electricity of his playing kind of bounced off everything, and it sort of took its full shape. And then I think that's when we knew that we were close to finish, and that we had, it was definitely a moment of wow, this is something.
When Aaron suggested working with Matt Barrick, I didn't know that he would want to even work on this, because these songs weren't very drum centric until Aaron came into the picture. But we went to Philadelphia, where Matt Barrick lives, and also Brian McTeer from Minor Street Recordings, and who also worked on my previous record, Epic. And so we went to Minor Street with our hard drive and brought some of the sessions in for him to play over, because there were certain songs that, we're kind of, Aaron would call it circling the vortex, where he's like, give me a deadline, because if it's open-ended, I'll keep circling this vortex, and we won't know until it's done, until someone tells us it's done. And so we ended up bringing it to Philly to try to hone in some of the tracks a bit. And Matt played on a handful of tracks that definitely made it sit just right.
Here, sing me yourself, tell me you want to be shown.
Warsaw actually, it's funny as we go through song by song now, I wrote a lot more on the road than I thought. That song, I was opening up for the National, and I had just an instrumental version of this song in my laptop. During that time, it was all internal mic laptop demos, and so they were very noisy and hissy, and it almost sounds like tape hiss, but I just remember writing Stream of Consciously in between sets and being on the road, opening up for the National. He brought us on pretty early before we even finished the record.
So Warsaw was a song that had existed as a fragment, I believe, and it was in a hard drive that after like maybe 6 months of working off and on, because the National was touring at that time. It was the High Violet like era. So we were busy and touring a lot. And whenever I would come home, Sharon would come over and we'd make stuff because she was home. But at some point we kind of like went and looked on this hard drive to see what other demos or ideas she had, and we found a bunch of things, and Warsaw was one of them. And I remember, I think Serpents had already been recorded, and we felt like there needed to be cousins of it because it was there was this raw, visceral kind of punk energy in Sharon, and like some anger, and just kind of like, because she has such a stunning voice and she can write these perfect songs that were kind of fragile and vulnerable, but then she also had this kind of raw, more aggressive punk energy. And so certain songs like Warsaw, I felt like that was where you could hear it coming out and taking shape, and we wanted it to sound kind of fucked up. So I think it was recorded. I can't remember exactly how we did it, but there were like I remember the guitar sound. I think it was maybe early day of like recording with my phone. Also, like I wanted to kind of set it to sound shitty, and I think her demo set that was the charm of it, was that it sounded pretty fucked up. So we tried to keep that.
I think he played guitar on that one, and because I've never been a soloer really on the guitar, but he has such a beautiful and specific tone that I remember just taking notes of pedals and how he could control them in a way that I never even understood how people put their pedals in a certain order to get a specific sound, because it's something that I didn't do until way later, and I still don't use that many pedals on stage, but he has a very specific tone.
That's been like, I feel like her character started to fully form in the whole record, and this weird like Patti Smith lineage or PJ Harvey, like that she was in that lineage more than anything else, at least to me.
I want to show you.
We were both vulnerable because for me it was a new experience, and it wasn't like I had thought to myself, oh, I want to be a producer or I want to produce other people. I hadn't had that thought. It just sort of happened. And I think for her, she wasn't really coming to me because she wanted the guy from the National to make her record or something. It was just because I was a nice person with a studio, and I seemed, I don't know, maybe it was disarming or something to have it be so, like, it was cozy, you know. This was the first moment of just like falling in love with someone's music and voice. And it was really Sharon who gave me the opportunity.
There were your eyes in the dark of the room, the only one shining, the only set I had met in years. It's not because I always look down, it might be I always look out. It might be I always look out.
Give Out was one of those songs that Aaron would call deceptively simple, because even though there's only 3 or 4 chords in that song, the turnarounds are never the same, and it's harder to play to than most people realize. But it's a very driving narrative song that I was afraid to add too much to, but he was very sensitive in having that song be like a slower build than the other songs, and that one is like super minimal.
Give Out was one where I think I recorded her playing it and singing it once, maybe. Can't remember if like if I played the guitar and she sang, or she sang and played at the same time and then I played to it. And then those melodies, the electric guitar melodies, like little hooks and stuff, just kind of came to me. And that was like an early example of like a technique that like that feeling of playing what you hear in response to a song and there being with kind of a theme. But I think it was clear to both of us that it didn't need very much. It was just like even Sharon playing that song completely by herself, it's like complete. So it was just very, very compelling and moving. I think it elevated with what we added, but it didn't need much. So like those themes that come in are really beautiful and kind of responsive to what she's doing. But like overall, it just didn't need anything.
I'm biting my lip as confidence is speaking to me. I loosen my grip from my palm, put it on your knee. In my way, I say you're the reason why I'll move to the city, or why I'll need to leave.
Give Out is about a very specific moment where when I first met someone and he was a bartender working while I was playing a very stripped down show at Chenet Bar way back in the day. And it's one of those shows where there are 2 people there and everybody else is playing pool, and I'm kind of an afterthought, but I think most people get used to that when they get started. And I remember looking up and he was the only one listening in the whole entire room, and that kind of began our relationship. And eventually that relationship kind of, all the reasons that we fell in love were also all the reasons that I had to leave town a lot and made it harder on our relationship.
What's with the eyes in the back of the room? The only ones trying, the only ones I have let in years. It's not because I always give up. It might be I always give out. It might be I always give out.
Some of the demos that I shared with Aaron, I was surprised the ones that he picked out. The song Serpents was a song that I thought was too intense and too aggressive. And I had never shared that part of myself musically before, other than just for myself, because a lot of how I write tends to be what I'm going through at the time, very self-therapeutic. So it's just to get something out that I don't have the words for yet. And that was a song when I was having a really hard day. But he encouraged me to lean into that feeling, and that this was a side that my fans would be open arms to hear, because it was all part of my arc, part of my journey. So I don't know if that song would have made the record if he hadn't encouraged me to do so.
Well, that one, I think like I guess I could instinctively feel that there was all this potential for it to be like this runaway train of a rock song where it's just like really intense and kind of, yeah, it just felt like, oh, this is a cathartic rock song. But it needed to be formed because I think it was not fully formed in its demo state. And like, so we kind of like played it, and then that hook or whatever on the slide just felt like, again, just that's what I heard from the moment playing it for some reason.
In the writing of Serpents, it's definitely is about honing your own demons, and in describing it to people in the studio, again, I was very nervous about it starting to feel driven or too intense because it's one of those things. I don't know if it's just about being a woman and being angry or being, like, it's something that you have to be careful about because of how writers tend to describe women in music. But it was definitely more about overcoming something from my past in order to get to a better place. And I feel like everybody that recorded the song wanted to help me have a catharsis in order to keep moving on.
Serpents in my mind, looking for your cries. Everything changes. I don't want mine to this time.
It's also like the way we were relating to each other, probably increasingly finding this electricity in her songs or something. It was like that was the mood. So, and expressing the anger or like kind of tension and feeling that were in the words, and how she was singing, like you needed sounds that could do that. So the drums and the slides and the kind of like overdriven feeling of that song. And yeah, it reminded me that one. I mean, it reminded me of like the best of like the rock songs the National has written, where they kind of just like play themselves almost. Like it's just like, same thing when Matt Barrick played to it, which is kind of instantaneous that it blew up as it did.
That's one of those songs that as soon as like a real drummer could come into the fold, from the demo that I had in Serpents, you could hear my really terrible machine gun like taps on the keyboard, and he was very sensitive to what I did in the demo form and versus how he could interpret it in a much more elegant way.
You enjoy sucking on dreams, so I will fall asleep with someone other than you. I had a thought you would take me seriously and listen more. Serpents in my mind, I am searching for your cries. Everything changes.
Aaron was definitely encouraging me. He's like, "You're a rocker." He's like, "You don't even know it, but you're a rocker." And I was like, "I don't know what you're talking about." I mean, leading up into, the last couple of years, I was a classical guitar most of the time. And I think I went from a classical guitar to a hollow bodied. And I was intimidated to play a regular electric guitar until he had his Jag. And after he allowed me to use his beautiful Jag, I found one shortly after we made that record as a commemoration of making this record with him.
Yeah, I think it would have literally been on certain songs, like rather than track them on acoustic, I just would give her my Jazzmaster or my brother's Jaguar or something, and just, because we play these old, really beat up but beautiful guitars from the early 60s, and they just sound amazing. And like certain songs like Serpents or Warsaw or All You Can, like they just sounded, for her to track them on electric, it just felt transformative as opposed to strumming an acoustic guitar where it kind of immediately places it in something. And that was really liberating. And I also I remember wanting her also to improvise.
That definitely changed the way I wrote moving forward. And he definitely allowed me to lean into that angst that I feel like I really needed to express. And I feel like as a woman, he gave me permission to do so. And I think other people connect with that too. When I wrote Kevin's, I was in that sublet, and it was interesting because when I first wrote it, the demo version, it was very stream of conscious, and it was one of those things that I wrote in one sitting, and I almost have no idea where it came from, but I was definitely talking about how someone that I knew at one time, how they dealt with their temper, and it was conversations I was always afraid to have because of their temper. And I was always afraid to talk about it because, I think when you're in those friendships or relationships where you feel like you're walking on eggshells with someone and you can't actually just talk to the real person, you're only talking to the emotional part. And I think I was trying to dissect that without realizing it. Most of the songs I write stream of consciously, I feel like the meaning comes forward later because I don't have the words for it myself until I look back and kind of do a self-therapy check on the lyrics that I didn't realize I was writing.
That one, yeah, it's it's more Baroque or something in a weird way. It's kind of this, Sharon has songs like that that are just very specific to this sort of way she was hearing it. And so we had that one is not, definitely not on a click. And I'm playing the drums on an MPC pad. And it was a really magical recording, how we captured it. And the song is held together by a thread, kind of like if you would try to replay the bass or replay anything on that song, I don't know that it would work really. So we just kind of were in the moment. And I say Baroque just in the sense of it feels more, it's odd somehow, or it's kind of not conventional, even though the form is conventional. It's just something about it. It feels, very Sharon.
My reference for Kevin's was Sinead O'Connor. I wanted it to have that urgency of nothing compares to you while still having a bit of myself in there, but that was my reference early on, that marriage of acoustic with some bit of electronic element.
It reminds me a lot of the garage, just the sound of it, just how it feels. And it honestly feels like that garage studio we had built after the success of Boxer. Already at that point, I feel like there was a real charm in that space. And I kind of think there was magic there that there isn't, that I've never rediscovered in other places actually. So, but it was, I can listen to it and hear oh, I know where we made that and how we made it, and it's has a real feeling. So, but having a beautiful place to be where you actually feel inspired to make something, I think it's really important.
One of my sublets I remember very specifically, I was reading Patti Smith's Just Kids, and I hadn't finished writing this one song yet. It was called Leonard. And I was feeling like all of this universal feeling that this was all supposed to be happening when you just get a feeling that it's kismet. And I was reading her book, Just Kids, and as I was reading it, I saw that she had met Robert Mapplethorpe about 2 blocks from where I was subletting. And in that one day, I finished lyrics to Leonard and Kevin's. And I just was trying to conjure as much of her spirit as I could in that time, which New York was very new to her, and she was very wide-eyed and full of wonder at the time. And I was trying to feel optimistic because I was snowed in, and it was New Year's of 2009, I guess, 2009 or 10. And I was just trying to get my life together. But with her backstory, knowing that she was always kind of hustling and always constantly figuring it out, I felt like those 2 songs were the most current of what was going on in my life at the time.
There he goes. He finally closed the door. I turned the lock, feeling more confused than before. What gives? I thought that you would love more. Now you're a coward, sure. Then he rings, look in his eyes.
I remember when I was writing Leonard at the same place in Fort Greene. It was late at night. It was during the blizzard, locked in this apartment. And I think it was around that New Year's where I was supposed to go home to visit my family in New Jersey, but I had actually seen Patti Smith at New Year's at the Bowery. And I came straight home. The blizzard hit like a day or 2 later, and I was just reeling. And I just remember thinking, Pissing in a River was the first song I had ever heard by her that really moved me in this way. And I wanted to marry Pissing in a River with Leonard Cohen. And it was about 1 or 2 in the morning. And it was another one of those songs I just wrote stream of consciously, like, can I write a Leonard Cohen song? Probably not. But I'm going to play the guitar like I'm playing the drums and just try to swim around it and see what happens.
I can't remember if she called it Leonard because of like the Leonard Cohen aspect of the music and the production. But yeah, I remember embracing that sort of like So Long Marian sort of, I don't know, Mazzy Star like world. And this just soaring song that felt timeless and, where it was just a chance for her voice to soar in the ways that it can. And the feel, I like the feel. It was like, just remember the feel and just loving playing that song.
He loves you well.
I was definitely dissecting a similar theme to, kind of that feeling of you make your bed, you lie in it, you falling in love, and then my life being on the road and trying to figure out how that's all going to work, how I'm going to find the right person that will understand the touring lifestyle, which is it's not an easy one to fully understand. Even as in my 40s and happily married, I'm like, I'm still figuring out that balance, but it's funny. I'm tackling the same subjects.
He's smart. He leaves me wanting more, knowing that I gave less and knowing why. Time is what I would need, full of myself indeed. Just walk away, surprised he loved you.
If it weren't for Aaron, I have never heard horn arrangements or string arrangements on songs before. And it just, not because I don't like them, just because it never occurred to me because of what I had access to. And I wasn't surrounded by it and how I came up.
My idea, I think, was to have these high sort of celestial Leonard Cohen-like strings, that like hovering in the up in the ether, and sort of a watercolor idea. And Rob Moose was this brilliant violinist who was starting to arrange strings at that time for many people, and was a friend who had played in Sufjan's band with my brother. And so he just, when I had the idea to add high sort of Leonard Cohen-like strings to the song, he was the person that felt perfect. And at that time, I think he came and played the parts in the studio, but a lot of times now he just plays them in his own studio and sends them in. So now I've probably made hundreds of songs where he's arranged strings on them, but that would have been one of the first.
Rob has worked with Aaron a lot. I think they still even work together, and he's quite a character. He walks in the room, he knows what he's doing as soon as he walks in the door. He's got this air of confidence that you can't overlook. And I feel like he already had an idea of what he wanted as soon as he heard it, but he came in one day to hear it, and then he returned with he brought a few people after that to do the arrangement in the live environment. And I think that process is interesting because, it does take a minute to kind of absorb not just the song itself, but the space that's there without just filling spaces, but supporting it in this other way. And he tried to honor my Leonard Cohen references, and it's just a whole other way of thinking that I'm still doesn't come naturally to me, but it's definitely was added to my palette as I learned how to write and express myself later.
I wanted to try for you, wanted to die for you, dramatic things, the lies, I loved you,
Inline is like the dirge of all dirges. And I think I was trying to conjure a bit of Neil Young in that one.
I think Inline was kind of the Crazy Horse song. It's very simple and kind of slow moving. Yeah, I've always associated it with Neil Young for some reason. It just reminds me of that kind of song.
I was a child. I wasn't worried. Tempted and dark, waiting for love, I was late.
Another joke with me and my friends is that I'm like queen of the dirge, and you just kind of lean into it. But yeah, there's always the fear that I'm like, is this too slow, or is it a good slow, or is it, it's a constant battle for me and my material. I think was Jenn Wasner on that one. Sorry, sometimes I never know what makes what makes the credits or doesn't, but okay, cool. All right, great. So my memory isn't the worst.
Well, Jenn and Julianna were friends of Sharon's. And I knew Jenn from my oak already, but that was more Sharon inviting in friends to sing, and it felt like a great idea to sort of have a community of voices to harmonize. And but yeah, they kind of came again, like it felt just like that was the spirit of the time. That era also, I mean, it was partly we had learned it from Sufjan and the way how he had been making records with like, he would literally just be like, play anything you can hear, you know, or he would say it to friends, and then he would end up on his records, he would have had 30 people playing, and then he would just, over a long period of time, edit it down into whatever he was imagining. And there's so many people around Brooklyn at that time passing through or living there. So it was just great. Like we just have people, those were friends of hers, and Sharon, I think, was a wonderful thing that they could come sing.
Yeah, Julianna Barwick and I came up in New York around the same time, and we were friends. We played shows together. We even did a run of shows together on tour. She jumped in the van a time or two, and we're still friends to this day. She lives in LA now. But she just has like one of those really beautiful, ethereal voices. And I hate to use the word haunting because it's used so often, but her range is just, it's epic. And she's also just a really wonderful person to be around. So I knew that having her presence in the studio would only help me feel comfortable and free to express myself, but also knowing that she would feel the freedom and safety as well.
That's just how it was back then. We all played on each other's records, and a million records like that I played on that I probably wasn't credited for, didn't care. You know, you just kind of did it, and everybody was helping each other out. And yeah, so like, I doubt anyone was paid to play on these records. You know what I mean? It was kind of like, I mean, it happens even still to this day. Like sometimes Justin or someone will be like one time he asked me, he was like, did I ever get paid for playing anyone's record? I was like, yeah, you did. He's like, he didn't even know. But it was, yeah, it's kind of how it was. It's not how the major label world works at all, but kind of indie world is more like this.
It was like the first time in a collaborative environment that I could just see that people are there for you and you can use what you will. And there's that understanding of if you're coming into something like that, you know, given the permission, you can utilize what they give you however you want to. And it was really grounding to witness that.
It was super important to Sharon, one of her favorites. And I remember like really encouraging her to play electric guitar and also to kind of improvise on the song. So you can hear her doing that in there. And I liked that it was this like slacker, crazy horse Sharon song.
But yeah, I think it was like a matter of like, I was learning how to, when to play to a click, when I didn't need to. Because, you know, you kind of, I'm not used to playing to a click, especially during that time. I was very much like, oh no, it's the vibe of the live space if we're going to be playing together. And you know, it also depends on the other players and what they're comfortable with. And you can kind of feel it breathing a bit. And I wanted it to be more of a meditation with still kind of like this meandering guitar until the final catharsis of, you know, just that feeling of waiting and finally being able to let go.
Sharon's mind, it became clear very quickly that like she would sing one part, but then you would realize there were 8 other parts, vocal parts in her mind simultaneously that were equally important, or there was no lead vocal. A lot of times it was like this, her way of, arranging was like in writing, it was all sort of this harmonic interwoven quilt of voices. And I think that applies to the music too. So I think that started to emerge, but obviously you can hear it much more later in her musical journey, which as she got more, experienced as a producer and started to experiment, where she kind of became this like savant of just shape-shifting and trying things. And she's just made so many classic recordings.
I grew up in the choir, so I think over the years I've been learning how to ease up on harmonies, because I think sometimes the wall of sound of vocals can just be too much. But, if you're a singer, you can harmonize up to wazoo. And so I think learning when it's necessary, learning when a double vocal actually can act as a chorus, and yes, learning when those moments of intimacy are better off with a single vocal, but also letting other singers in to do something that you're not anticipating to help you look at the song in a different way. And I think this album was a big bridge of that for me. Because, my first one I only really made with one other person. My second record, I brought just a few of my friends in and they played what I asked them to. But this was my first step in giving people a bit more freedom to put themselves into it. And I think that helped me look at my own vocals differently as well.
The sun is at stake, and I'm at your window, beyond all sleep, and I can't speak in all Tokyo, translate memories.
When I first wrote All I Can, I remember I was on my first tour of Japan, and I was on a solo tour, and I was in a hotel, and I could not sleep. And it was another one of those songs that I wrote in one sitting, and it was just on my phone, like the voice memo app in my phone. And, just the yearning of being away from home and also being a little bit out of your element in Japan. I felt like I was the only one up in the world on a whole entire other planet, and reflecting on this very bizarre life that I was leading.
We all make mistakes, we all try to free the size of the past. We don't want to last, need love erase to let out my mind.
The demo was just guitar and vocal from my memory, and I sent it to Aaron, I think, from Japan, and this one was definitely Bryan on the drums, because this was one of the first songs I think he played on in the synchronicity of the recording of the record. But he just was so sensitive when he came in, and when the drums finally come in to the song, that, I hate to use the word pocket, but the snare sound that he got and the feel that he had, and when he decided to come in, just startled me in like a really as an awakening of where this song could go, because there wasn't a whole lot going on until Bryan added his drums to it, and made me play and perform differently than I would have, obviously, if it was just me and the guitar.
All I Can, I just remember like that was the one that's sort of the most influenced maybe by the National it felt like I could, when she first played it for me, like I just felt it was like this torch song, kind of like this long, slow building, epic song. And so that was the one where like Bryan Devendorf, who's the great drummer one of the great drummers, I think, of our generation, when he plays in the National. So I'm biased, but I just think he's truly, no one can play like him. And he kind of came and played in the garage, and my brother plays guitar, and it just was like this, we kind of did, that's where I hear like the two, like the National and Sharon colliding.
How much you wanted, so much you found. Try not to bear too much to be calling my heart. I know you are real.
And it did become this kind of like epic song, that has this huge art. It only has a few chords, but the thing about Sharon's songs is they always reset in unusual ways. So it's like you think you know how it goes, but actually you can easily get lost if you don't pay attention. So she's not like symmetrical in that sense. She's idiosyncratic.
Playing it and singing it is definitely a challenge. And the circular song where it's the same chords over and over again, but they turn on themselves so that in every part of the song it starts on a different chord, so it feels different. But I think there's only 3 chords. But the way the melody develops is just really fun as a singer. So when it kind of grows, and I love a slow build, and I like challenging myself as a singer. I mean, usually when I finish making a record and I look back at the range that I did, I'm like, why did I do this to myself? Because I will never be able to do this at every single show. But just melodically, it was it's like an acrobatic, or when you're singing it. But it also goes from very quiet to pretty intense by the end. So it's a good workout, but it's also All I Can is a very healing song to sing.
Do all I can, but who is my man? The memory of you, the life I would do to carry a
Well, We Are Fine. I wrote this on the ukulele, which I don't think I've ever written another song on a ukulele that's been released, if I can say that confidently. And but when you're traveling and you have a smaller instrument, it's easier to write when you're on the road and in small quarters. And I may have written that one while traveling, but I had never written on a ukulele before. But you have different kind of formations. It's similar to a guitar, but anytime you pick up a different instrument, you play it a little bit differently, you sing a little bit differently, you hear arrangements a little bit differently. And so I think it's good practice.
Trying hard to breathe, head between my knees, take my hand and squeeze, say I'm alright.
I feel like I almost started writing that as a joke to myself in learning how to deal with panic attacks, and learning how to slow the thoughts down so the spiral doesn't turn into asthmatic breathing. But I'm not the best in crowds, but especially when I moved to New York, I was moving to the belly of the beast. But I knew that if I wanted to pursue music seriously, that I wasn't going to do it out of the basement of my parents' house in New Jersey. And I had been seeing a therapist for about a year, helping find ways to, I didn't want to take medicine. I wanted to have tools to help prepare me to be able to see the light of day. Before I moved to New York, I was in a pretty abusive relationship and needed a lot of help before I decided to move on from my parents' house. So for about a year or so, I lived with my parents to get back on my feet. And the therapist that I saw gave me all these tools and breathing exercises and mindfulness and taught me how to be able to walk into a room and gave me the confidence to do open mics before I even went to New York. So bringing that to New York, it was, in a way that song is an homage to her as well, because she would joke that at the time I used to smoke, I don't anymore, but at the time she's like, well, you could just disguise your smoking as like, that's your tool if you need an excuse, but you can also just go outside if you can't handle yourself. And so like that turned into my mechanism to step away, take a moment and come back in. Now I can just breathe. But so yeah, that was a big part of that song was commiserating with people that do have social anxiety. I still have problems with crowds, which I've chosen a hell of a profession to work on that. But I think, you focus on one thing, you make eye contact, you realize the room is usually full of love, and that usually gets me out of it pretty quickly.
Tell me not to trip or to lose sight.
Well, We Are Fine is the song where Zach from Beirut sings, and that was kind of like this beautiful folk song that then took on this kind of like muddy, slightly swampy feeling, and then Zach's beautiful voice elevates it with Sharon, and just felt that was, I think, one of those moments where we're like, oh gosh, we're really making a record, We have all these special songs and they're starting to really like take on all this dimensionality.
When I finished writing that song, I remember, Zach Condon from Beirut and I were fairly close. I used to work at Bada Bing Records with Ben Goldberg, and Beirut was a band that was growing pretty rapidly when I started working there. And he and his bandmates were always really sweet to me. I actually met Ben Lands, who plays trombone with Beirut, who also plays with the National. And I met Ben through Beirut and working at Bada Bing. So everything kind of came full circle in the making of this record and reconnecting with people that I met from my work and being able to bring them in creatively. But I know that Zach deals with anxiety, and we've bonded on that over the years. And when I asked him if he would want to sing on this song, he was so gracious in saying yes. And I've admired his voice and his band and his persona on stage and just who he is, and I was honored that he would even consider it with how busy he had been. But so that kind of grew from that friendship there.
It's okay to feel everything is real. Nothing left to steal, 'cause we're
Magic Chords was a cool story. There was an old church organ, like an old church, like a Wurlitzer from the 70s, the kind that you can like press play on a beat and then like It has different settings, sort of like you would imagine in some like 70s mega church or something. Just like this organ that was made for people to accompany or provide music that maybe couldn't really fully play the instrument. And so it has like presets and a little button called magic chords where you could then, almost like an omnichord, just press buttons that have different chord shapes. So like G major, A minor, C major, and like move around like that. And I left the studio at some point and came back, and Sharon had like pressed play on some sort of waltz or that beat that you hear in there, and then she was just like pressing these buttons and playing a chord progression, and I just was like, that has to be a song.
I remember that Aaron left me alone in the studio on the day that I wrote Magic Chords. That one I actually wrote in his studio. He had a beautiful organ in the back of the studio that I didn't know how it worked or anything, but he's like, here are some beats. Here, it's basically like an organ version of an omnichord, which is why the omnichord came into our live shows later. But there was a setting on it called Magic Chord that I just hit, and there was a beat happening, and he came back and he heard the beat and he heard the chord progression as I was in the middle of writing it, and he was just like, yes, keep going.
So we recorded it, and that was one of the arguments actually that we did after she didn't want to put that song on the record. Because I don't know, I think maybe because the genesis of it felt like less, I don't know, somehow in her view it was less important or something. But like I just like, no, there's weird spontaneous magic in that, and we think we need to put it on. So that was one where we played chess about that, and that's how I think then she ultimately came to love.
You're coming today with the hype in your step. You kinda marvel at yourself. You gotta breathe. You gotta breathe. You got to lose. You got to lose. You got to lose sometimes.
And he just tracked as I was writing it, and we encouraged Zach to sing on it later, but I didn't really know what I was doing as I was doing it. But as my husband says, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm just doing it. And the song ended up developing from there, but that was with Aaron trusting me in the studio alone.
Let's find something that can last. Like cigarette ash, the world is collapsing around me. Let's try to do the best we can. I think I need more than the flowers and letters, man.
I remember the writing of this one. There's a story that goes along with that. This guy that I dated briefly, who's still a friend, but I remember he was walking me home, and after we had dinner one night, and I was making this record, and so no, it wasn't this record, but he had dropped me off at my front door, and I just wanted to go home and write and make music, and he wanted to keep hanging out, and I could already tell he was a little tipsy. But he's like, no, I really want to come in. I was like, no, I really want to make music. And he put his finger in my face and he told me, he said, you blew it. And I'll always remember that about my friend who put his finger in my face and said, "You blew it," in like such a Jersey way that it was kind of sweet in a way. And so I ended up writing that song shortly after. I think it may have even been that night.
And it hurts too much to laugh about it. Yes, it hurts too much to laugh about it. Hey, please think about it, friend. I know you're lonely, I'm here riding in the dark, trying to get the balls, but it hurts too much to ask.
Well, hopefully it sounds like I'm talking to a friend, you know. You're just like you're talking a friend off a ledge or something. But yeah, just reflecting on, you know, how I interact with people. But anyway, one of those come home needing to write, feeling feelings.
I just remember this sort of like beautiful folk song. It's more like a folk song, I think, than some of the other songs, which are more kind of these weird hybrids, or they're more leaning in a more alternative direction. So, but it was beautiful and sort of flowery.
Ask is another one of those Devendorf entrances that you can't really replicate, but his musicality in the drums transported a lot of the record, because I don't have that sensitivity. I've never thought of his drums as melodic until I got to be in a room with him and watch him perform.
If it hurts too much to ask, it's not that I don't cry, it's that I have to hide, yeah, it's that I have to hide, so I won't be there to ask, so I won't be there to ask, so I won't be there to ask.
That one, you can hear that it's not on a click, actually. And I remember Bryan being like having a hard time playing to it. But also like his way of playing fills that are sort of like sometimes rolling on top of each other, or like not starting where you think they're going to, you know, and just having this like weird linear thing that was really cool and exciting.
He's just incredible to watch play. Like it's like watching somebody paint or something. But he's so inventive. And yeah, I mean, standing side stage during those national tours that I got to go on were definitely life-changing.
Come home in the morning, drive me to work, tell me I'm worth all the miles that you put on your car.
There's songs that blend together for me, like Ask, I'm Wrong, because I wrote them all around the same period. So I think the arc of them and how I wrote them solo and how I brought them in and fleshed them out, like, are all kind of similar. So it's funny, I have all these different versions of that song in my head, but that was one that Aaron wanted to turn on its head because it sounded a lot like the original version does sound so much like. There's Tell Me, there's I'm Wrong, there's Ask, there's about 3 to 5 songs that I wrote in the same period that sound very similar. But the original demo is very much sounds like Ask. And I remember kind of being stunned that Aaron just said, let's just take it all out.
When she played me the initial part of the elements of the song, I think I remember just feeling like, oh, this could literally just be a drone, most of it, and your voice. It would be so beautiful.
Tell me I'm right, tell me I'm funny, even when I'm not. Earrings and I feel you smile in the eyes.
think I may have even was unsure about it for a little while, but I think as it started unfolding into this arrangement, I saw more of the beauty in it and the value of having more space on the record.
Yeah, I love that one too. I think that's one of my favorite recordings, and I think it was built in this drone world that was just so enveloping and kind of like this deep. Like, I think at that time we talked about John Cale a lot, and we talked about, I think, sometimes reducing songs just to a chord tone and letting it be, just like getting lost in creating a more visceral watercolor of drones, I mean, you hear on the next song, Joker Lie, like that was like a watercolor of like strings and just sort of this more beautiful type of drone or backdrop to the song. Whereas I'm Wrong, it's like kind of like there's more feedback and kind of like subversive. Everything feels like it might just fall apart or something.
Bryce came in and did an arrangement for it. And I'm Wrong turned into the song that we ended up closing our sets with, because even though it's very much a meditation, it's also very, it turns into something very cathartic and chaotic and dissonant and very different from what I was playing at the time.
I mean, it wasn't even really, it would have just been improvised for sure. So like nobody's writing any notes on any of this. It's just like, kind of improvised, I think. But yeah, I think the arc of it was just such an amazing moment of like the recording and the performance. Just really everything was working, and there's like such beautiful overtones in it and such kind of depth. It's really moving.
I think I leaned on Aaron a lot for the sequencing of this record, because I was still fairly new to that game, since my first record was very minimal and the second one was very short. So, it's always a bit of whack-a-mole when you're moving songs around, and you want it to feel like a journey, and you want to space out what is the intro song? Is the third song really the single? Is the ending really closure? Or do you want a cliffhanger? I mean, the psychology of a sequence is, was something I was just learning about at that time. But I think Warsaw felt like an opener to me because it comes right in. And I didn't want to start with a slow build. And I think Serpents was third, so I guess that was the single. But I don't, what are the losses sequences? I'm still not sure today if that's even how people listen to them. But I still work on sequencing as someone's listening to an album or, A side, B side. But I think Joke or Lie probably was always an ending for me, because it did feel like that record wanted a bit of peace to end with. It's still an ellipsis, I guess, but it gives the listener a bit of a reprieve by the end, to have a bit of a slowdown and a space without the tension so much.
What should I do? I am lost. Tell me to leave the next time I'm in front of you. I can't relate.
In a way, I'm Wrong is like the end, and Joker Lie is the coda or something, or the goodbye. And it's feels like it's going somewhere else, or she's reflecting on the record, and it has this beautiful, almost jazziness to the harmonic world of that song. Joker Lie does.
During the recording of Joke or a Lie, that is when I got to see Clarice play. She played multiple parts for that song. And I think Rob Moose was playing with Clarice on that one, if I'm not mistaken. But she played multiple parts, so she played on top of herself as she was overdubbing, and much to Rob's direction. But she is also very intuitive, and she's an elegant player, and it's really, I remember just watching somebody play cello was just a beautiful thing anyway. I was kind of mesmerized by just her form and ability to just stack the way she did on the fly. Joke or a Lie is a meditation for me, and it's really about slowing down and hearing each other and just being in that moment, even if it's hard, even if it's stressful, and like being able to be present in that moment, and not necessarily needing to talk to understand what the other person is going through. Just being able to focus on each other's breathing, to make eye contact, to be able to be present in a room together without having to say anything sometimes is better.
Let us escape for a night. Breathe the silence. I am alone, but I am alone in this room with you.
I remember Aaron being supportive and open to the idea of going to Philadelphia to work on mixes with Bryan. And, it's very surreal as the songs are coming together and you're hearing them in their finished form, and being able to say, okay, we're done with this. Because it's a period of time in your life that you spent so much time on. And I know how much Aaron gave up, how much time he put into making this, and the time that would have been off from the road to like be with his amazing partner, Stina. But I mean, looking back on that time, it's pretty incredible that we were able to make anything with everything that was going on in our lives, between him touring and making another record and me having a different schedule and being here and there and everywhere at once, but still being kind of a freshman in the studio. That was definitely a huge jumping off point for me, and learning how to talk to a band, have the confidence to play with a band. And it felt like a real accomplishment, not just for me, but just for him and what he was going through and what he gave up to do it. And getting to hear it in a studio beyond Aaron's studio in Philadelphia, where I had just come out of making the previous record, I just felt like my family kept growing.
And then actually, the record was mixed there by John Lowe, who was the engineer at Minor Street, and who from that day, basically, he ended up being sort of my main studio collaborator for 15 years after that, and so it was kind of a beautiful moment, to meet him. And he became someone that he moved up to Hudson and worked with me every day for, more than a decade.
I think Aaron embodies that as a musician and collaborator, and that he always brings his family in on projects. And I feel like our families married during the making of this record and have only helped us build our circle. As I said earlier, when I first reached out to Aaron, it was to possibly play on a song or two on Epic. So to listen to an album that we made together, I didn't have crazy high expectations going into it, because I didn't know how far I could take my demos, because a lot of the songs would just be guitar and vocal and my shitty programming to go into people's ears. So it blew my mind to hear what they became. And, I just felt this camaraderie with Aaron and everybody that held my hand as part of the process. My mind was blown.
We were so proud of it when it was done, and she showed me the artwork, and there's a picture on the inside of us sitting in front of the garage in Brooklyn. I was just so proud of it. It reminded me of when the National would finish records, what it felt like, where it's like, you're like, oh, we did it. We did it in the minute for a lot. Because a lot of times you just don't know that you're going to do anything good, no matter how many things you've done that you love. Like when you start again, you kind of feel like you've never done anything at all. So I just remember feeling like really proud of it and really proud of her.
And I also had this overwhelming feeling of, oh shit, okay, now I'm going to have to tour this and I'm going to need a band in order to tour this. So it was beautiful and overwhelming. And, finishing Tramp and touring that record was a major turning point for me because I was learning how to have a band. I was learning how to tour on a different level. Somewhere in the middle of making the record or towards the end, she signed to Jaguar and things were happening, she could feel this wave building. And for me, it became clear very early that she was making a transformative record. I don't know why, but it just felt like you could feel that it was going to be important to her fans and it was going to connect, it was connecting to anyone who would hear it. And it was connecting to us. And it was a very exciting moment where you just feel like, and I don't know that music is still like that. It doesn't, sometimes people make them incredible records now. They just don't connect or find an audience, but I feel like back then it was less music. It was before Spotify was really a thing. And it was still feeling like if you make your best record, people are going to listen to it, and they're going to go buy it at the record shops and you're going to go on tour and the songs are going to take shape and take on new dimensions when people sing them back at you. And it was just still had all that magic. And I'm not saying that that doesn't happen today, but I feel like it's more elusive and there's so many other factors at play now in terms of imaging, all that stuff, and the social media, parasocial narratives and all that. And I think this record really existed in an earlier time.
Put your coat on, then believe me, I tried.
I mean, it was really overwhelming. I remember I would read reviews for a while and, most of them were good. Some of them were not, but that's how it goes. But the bad ones would always make me spiral. But, being a publicist, I was so used to trying to log everyone that ever wrote about the record, because if I ever had to do my own promo again, I would have everybody that ever liked my record, documented. But I think I finally was able to take that hat off because I was like, screw that. I don't need to read my reviews. And I think that was something I had to learn about, because I think it's a constant reminder of, I made the record I wanted to make. I'm proud of what I made. And the fact that one person can make me second guess how I feel about it, that was something I had to learn about. And then, the shows were fun. I think being young and on the road and just not having a family yet, I wanted to say yes to everything. And I loved traveling and I loved my band. And some of my favorite shows I've ever played were on that record.
She came on tour with us a ton, and I would also go play with her a lot. I played with her on television. We kind of did a lot to promote it. And it felt just amazing to see it grow in that way. And then everything she's done since has just been even greater, So I think she's just kept on growing. Yeah, just a lot of gratitude towards Sharon for taking the chance with me. And then I never imagined that I would get to do all these things, never. I think if you would have told me then that it would ultimately become what I've done now, and I get to spend my days sort of making whatever I want with all these really talented people, and I've learned so much, and I've built studios upstate in New York and also in France, and just gotten to kind of like live and support my family with music, not just through the national and touring, because that was like, that's the word. That world is really hard, really brutal at times to be out there. Like, it's not conducive to the healthy life, really. So this is, and I think so. I'm really grateful to Sharon helping me discover that I had that ability, and that I could help create like a safe space for artists to make records.
When I look back at the making of Tramp, I just have so much gratitude for all of my friends and Aaron Dessner and his circle of friends that came in to help make this record happen. These songs used to be little demos living in my laptop and in voice memos on my phone, and you helped me find myself deeper as an artist that I didn't know I could be at that time. Thank you.
Visit lifeoftherecord.com for more information about Sharon Van Etten. You'll also find a full transcript of this episode and a link to purchase Tramp. Instrumental music is the song My Own Way by Emily Hines. Thanks for listening.